a lot of my patients, they come to the hospital and we have discussions about, well, I'm sorry, but grandma can't swallow food anymore. Do you think she would want a feeding tube? Because, a lot of people wouldn't want that. Maybe not being able to swallow because of bad dementia means that she should be passing away in peace without artificial nutrition. And they never had that discussion. So now you just met this person, right? Like you're their doctor, but you just met them. And now you're going to have this whole ass conversation about, do we try and prolong a life?
Stay tuned, stay curious. Enculturation Podcast. Welcome to the show, Ashim. Very honored to have you here. You've been somewhat of a very interesting figure to me because I've known you through the dance music side, creative side, but you also have a very strong medical degree, right? And medical experience. So I definitely excited to talk about a topic that is a mystery to me, but very dear to you, and that's the death and dying and the whole human aspect between like provider and patient, right? So before we get into all that, let's kind of like round out your profile, get to know you more as a person before we get into that. So yeah, tell me about like all your interests and your creativity and how you got to where you are.
Oh man. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, so I am an internal medicine doctor and I take care of patients in the hospital. So they call us hospitalists or acute care specialists. That's different than doctors that would see you in the clinic. So if you come to the hospital, to the emergency room, let's say like when COVID first broke out and people were coming in super sick, they needed a lot of oxygen, they couldn't go home, so they had to be admitted to the hospital. So basically my service will take care of you in the hospital. So yeah, we do like a lot of strokes, cancers, infections, heart attacks, stuff that, you just can't leave the hospital. You have to stay there. So I've been doing that since I started residency in 2010. So 13 years now. And I work in a community hospital in Oakland, with an underserved population. And yeah, that's the medical part. I published, I also have a publication in South Asian heart disease risk. I published that in residency.
Can you clarify what South Asian heart disease risk is?
Yeah, sure. So like we break up populations, and what we've seen is South Asian Americans that really are from India, that they have a higher risk of heart disease when you try and correct for factors like diet, age, sex, socioeconomic status, smoking, etc. So we had access, this was at Kaiser, we had access to a data set that was been going on for 30 years. So we just had a nice set of data that we could mine through. So we used that data set to see if there is actually an increased risk, and we did find that. We still don't know why. There's people trying to figure it out. But it might change screening protocols. If somebody is of South Asian descent, do you maybe do some screening tests earlier when they're younger or not?
So how does someone with your background end up in the music and dance scene? Because I believe you got introduced to the house scene, or I guess the house music and dancing in the 90s. Was it the New York City clubs? And then you also DJ and possibly play piano and rap as well? Because one of the reasons why I'm interested in that side and kind of forming a complete picture for you is I think there's like a lot of enigma around medical providers, right? Where they're viewed, at least, can't speak for everybody, but it's common to view as them like they're this profession without being a person outside of that profession, like
for sure
having their own interests or their own like things that we may find relatable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really insightful. I appreciate that you're trying to bring that out too, right? Like there's people behind the roles, the professional roles. And I feel like the medical profession has a lot to do with that perception as well, because we try and present ourselves like, really clean, authoritative, that I'm here to help you through something really difficult and to engender trust in us. I have to be a certain way, act a certain way. And a lot of that acting is not presenting other parts of yourself. And especially in what I do when there is a lot of death and dying and there's a lot of high stakes decision making, and people are at a crossroads often in their life. When we see them, you know, it's hard to kind of like joke around and like talk about the Warriors or something, because it can get really serious, you know. And so it is on us to also present ourselves like we're human too. We can have human conversations, and you know, we care about you, but you can also trust us with our knowledge. So I guess to bring it back, my grandfather in Bangladesh, so that's where my parents are from. So most people don't know where Bangladesh is, but it used to be part of India. It's the northeast part of India. They gained independence in 1971. Anyway, there's a whole history with partition. In 1947, India was partitioned into India and Pakistan, East Pakistan and West Pakistan. East Pakistan in 1971, they had a war of independence, and they became independent, became Bangladesh. So that's where my parents are from. And my grandfather was a physician there. And my mom was in med school there, and then came and did residency in New York in 1975. And my dad, he studied engineering in New York City in 1971. Yeah, I guess like the whole medical thing, there is a lineage there.
Did you get involved with music and dance in parallel, or was there like a need to maybe de-stress from pursuing a medical degree?
I think medicine came later. Like when I was little, like we had MTV, so I would just watch like, you know, 80s pop and, you know, like Michael Jackson, Madonna. I loved like the Fat Boys and, you know, like Public Enemy, like the videos were just cool, you know? And so I would dance, but like my parents, they didn't listen to American music. They would listen to some Bangladeshi songs. And so I grew up really with just like pop culture, basically. It wasn't like music was always playing in the house. It was like my sister was a big influence, and she was really into like Depeche Mode, Jane's Addiction, Erasure. So I think I was into like 80s pop, some hip hop, and then like new wave stuff. And then I really got into hip hop in like 94, 95. And it wasn't really popular where I grew up. You know, I grew up in the suburbs right outside of New York City. It's like 15 miles north of Manhattan. I started to go to clubs in New York City in 1996. And I was 16. So we'd have like fake IDs and stuff. So it was like the Limelight and the Tunnel.
Oh, so you were at those
Sound
parties?
Factory.
Okay. Yeah, those are prominent names.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, we were little kids, like from the burbs, you know, like, so it was just like, say like the first spiritual type of experiences that I had were in these clubs.
Was it a sense of community, or a sense of like seeing people release and connect through the music, or what do you mean by spirituality?
I was little, dude, and like we would like pay the bouncer like $20 extra to get in, because they knew that the IDs were fake.
Oh yeah, $20 in the 90s was a lot of money.
That's a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And like I had jobs, like I would work in the kitchen of a nursing home and stuff, and I think for me it was getting lost in the music while people are moving their body in an altered state of consciousness. And not just because of substances, but the music itself is almost a substance, like a vehicle to, for me to go into another state where you're just like 100% in it. Like it was like a movement meditation. I don't even know what meditation was. So I think I really caught the bug of, I always loved music since I was little, but how it feels in my body and how it makes me feel afterwards, like after dancing for 4 hours, how do you feel? And that feeling was so just like intoxicating and good that I always chased it, and I still am. And so I would say that those were like the first formidable experiences I had with music.
Were you ever scared, or like, how did you feel?
Yeah, man, like the New York in the 90s,
yeah,
dude. Like,
was that scary?
yeah, there were like people were bringing guns and like knives and shit. Like there was shit happening in the bathroom. Like somebody would get like.
How did you go with friends or with a group? Like did you go by yourself?
Yeah, it was always friends. Like I had a bunch of crazy friends that I probably wouldn't have done anything with. Like we kind of like. I love my friends so much. They, I have a best friend since I was 4. I'm gonna be 42 this month. So I have a group of friends since I was like in middle school and high school, and we're still really tight. Like I'm gonna see them in 3 weeks. So yeah, like, a bunch of us would go into the city and we were just wilding out, like, yeah, it was dangerous. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, we were taking our parents' cars, like they didn't know what was happening. And,
my social media algorithms has been somehow pumped full of articles or videos, right, that are tailored around how Gen Z or kids born after, I think, 95 have gotten the independence or the that kind of stage removed from them, because everything is like so supervised and sheltered nowadays, whereas prior to that people were just doing stuff like maybe walking to school when you're 5 years old, or like in your case going to a nightclub, like, and just kind of
yeah. Like one night I couldn't get home for some reason, like my ride left, and so I was like homeless in Manhattan for a night, and I like snuck into a hotel and like slept on a chair, and then the security guard was like, "What are you doing here?" And we used to wear those like big JNCO jeans and like, so you looked like a club kid, like, I had like whatever, like
to anybody who doesn't know what JNCO jeans are, it's spelled JNCO, and it's like the starter kit for a lot of kids back in the 90s. It's like very, very large. When I say large, it's hard to imagine now because I don't think anyone rocks it now. But it's like you could fit like 3 legs in one of the leg pants. Yeah.
That's like the rave scene when I got into that also when I was 16.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun to live like that, to not, be able to review everything online first and like.
So like you obviously got very far with academics. How did you maintain your academics while kind of like being in these environments? Was there a clash of like getting into trouble or staying up late, and then that interfered with your, like, I guess, day life?
I think school was just always easy for me. So like I still graduated with honors, but I, was cutting class in the morning a lot. So I was not a good student, man. Like I was, studying for tests that morning or whatever. But, luckily I had a memory where I could do that and I could regurgitate whatever they were, was in the homework really easily. So, and I don't think our high school was very challenging, to be honest.
My English teacher, his name was Mr. Hall. I don't know what he's up to nowadays, so he's probably not going to get in trouble with this. But yeah, I remember he taught in an English class, right? And so you know how teachers sometimes have audits or reviews. So before one of the audits came, he had us rehearse what we're going to ask him, and then how he's going to answer. And then during the audit, he busted out a guitar and started singing us Bob Marley, like a redemption song, right? And then after the auditor went away, he gave us all donuts.
I like that.
Yeah, so that's kind of like my one of my highlight California education experience.
That's cool. Yeah, actually, that reminds me of a story when before Eminem dropped "My Name Is" on the radio, he was on this radio program on Hot 97, which was like the hip hop station in New York, and it was called Future Flavors. It used to come out like I don't know, Tuesday nights or something, 11 o'clock. So I would record it on my tape deck, and then I would bring the tape to school, and I would listen to it in my Walkman on the bus ride home. And like Eminem like did this freestyle, and nobody knew who he was. We didn't know he was white. And I played the tape for my music teacher, Mr. Couples. And he used to like it whenever we played rap because he's never heard it before. And so me and my best friend growing up, Rudy, we would play him rap music. We would play it for the whole class. And he would say the same thing every time, no matter what rapper it was. He'd be like, sounds like Chris Rock. Like the only black person he knew.
You know what? Like, of all things you could have said, I was not expecting that.
Yeah. But he was cool, though. He was cool. There was a couple art teachers that were cool. Our tech was like, we built like rockets, you know, like with those like firecracker type of engines. Mm-hmm. That was the extent of our.
Oh yeah, I remember doing something similar to where we had like we designed different cars, right? And it's like
we did that too.
And then you put the rocket in the back of the car and see how far your design went. Yeah. You know, it's funny. Like I had those things. I left it at my aunt's house, and I was like, "Hey, do you still have it?" And she's like, "No, I don't." I'm like, How do you lose a hydraulic arm? Like,
she's like, I threw that shit out.
Because I mean, it's not a small thing. It's like a huge thing, you know. It's like it's like one of these things. Like, yeah, I just lost you the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. So let's kind of get into like your experiences as a medical practitioner, especially with the deaf and dying. So like that's a whole big topic, and I'm going to follow your lead as far as like where to start, you know, because I feel like
sure.
My initial thing is like there's like so many disconnects from the provider to the patient, whether it's like unrealistic expectations, you know, like, oh, why can't you cure me, or this is all your fault, or something like that, or maybe patients not taking personal responsibility for what they have to do, versus like expecting that this pill or this surgery is going to solve all their problems, you know, and then maybe not even being aware of like this action causes this consequence. And sometimes you get to a point where you're in the death and dying stage where you can't reverse that consequence anymore, you know. So that's all that is like a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it's a lot. I would say, or you know, to narrow it down, just keep it to my personal experience with what it's like to, you know, be with my patients when they're in that process of dying. And it's not something you think about when you're like in med school, that like, oh, this is like, you just don't have a lot of experience with it.
Was it even previewed or covered in med school as far as like the human side of it, or was it just basically purely science?
It was touched on. You know, it's one of those things you can't like read a textbook about, you know. So I've been doing this 13 years, still like, you know, it's life and death, man. It's like the biggest question that we have, right? And so, I think that my experience with my patients going through that process, has kind of been one of awe, in that it's not like we figure it out. Like, what is life? What is death? Why do some people die? Why are some people at complete peace when it's time to go? And why do some people struggle and fight like for every last breath? What are people's narratives about what death is and what life is? And if they didn't think about it, and you know, there might be some stress in their life, some unresolved story that they wanted to live, and they come to the hospital and we're like, I'm so sorry to give you this news, but you have a terminal cancer. You know, that's like a crazy thing for somebody to go through. And it always leaves me in awe of how people process it, how people go through it, how their loved ones come through and support, or not, or don't, or can't. And what is our response to being in that space? What is my response? Like, what am I saying? What am I doing to help this person feel more at ease? while also just giving them our version of the truth. Because it's not like doctors and medicine are like, you have 6 months to live and that is final. Like, we don't know. Like, we can't be that accurate. So we have to go by our estimations. And then as a patient hearing that, like, well, my doctor kind of doesn't know if I'm going to pass away this year or next year, or like, can I make it to my daughter's wedding? My son is going to have a kid. I just really want to see my grandson. Or we have patients that are in their 40s, and their kids are little. And so it's a difficult space to be in when you're talking about life and death to somebody, but you can't be exact. And so there's ambiguity, there's probabilities, there's percentages. And those concepts are really difficult to grasp for everybody. So I think that part of my job has been the part that, again, like, brings me back to the awe of life and death and all of it. And it's something nobody really wants to talk about. It's morbid, literally, right? But to me, it gives me a new perspective on things. Like, when I'm dancing, or just a simple thing like swallowing food. A lot of my patients can't swallow food. A lot of my patients, they come to the hospital and we have discussions about, well, I'm sorry, but grandma can't swallow food anymore. Do you think she would want a feeding tube? Because, a lot of people wouldn't want that. Maybe not being able to swallow because of bad dementia means that she should be passing away in peace without artificial nutrition. And they never had that discussion. So now you just met this person, right? Like, you're their doctor, but you just met them. And now you're going to have this whole ass conversation about, do we try and prolong a life?
What comes to mind is thinking about this book, how to have difficult conversations, because I'm like, these topics are super challenging and hard. Not only the nature of it, but like telling a stranger and how you might be on the receiving end of their processing.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody's different, and there's so many different cultures, and health literacy, and there's different ways how people think of the future. Like, I need to keep grandma alive forever, so throw that tube in and do whatever you have to do. And kind of as a provider, you have to be like, I don't know, is that what she would have wanted? Has she talked to you guys about it? Does she have anything in writing? And so,
is there a like general guideline on how to navigate this, or it's based on experience and the different styles of each provider?
There are guidelines, and we would recommend to all of our patients that they think about these things while they're healthy ahead of time, and they sign things like advance directives that put it in writing what I would want. I don't want to be kept alive with artificial nutrition or tubes, or I don't want to be intubated. I want to put on a breathing machine. Don't do CPR on me if my heart stops beating. Let me go in peace, that kind of stuff. Or I do want those things, right? But the issue that I see is a lot of people don't want to think about it. Like, I went through this with my parents. Like, my mom was like, bomb, advance directive. She sent it to me. I signed it. We got it notarized. And she did this in her 60s, dude. She's perfectly healthy. And my dad, who is not perfectly healthy, like, I had to talk to him for years about it, for years before he finally did it. And just for him to think about his mortality was like too difficult, and I understood that. And I understand that. But my mom, being a physician, to her, death is a different narrative. It's just something that has to happen. And she would want to happen. She would want the process to happen the way she wants it.
Terms.
Yeah, on her terms. And also so we know, her kids know, so that we're not like, what do we think mom would want to do? Because that's a crazy amount of stress that I see my patients, loved ones, go through all the time. So yeah, I would say, just to like wrap up the whole morbid conversation, that For me personally, that's the inspiration and awe of people that really draws me to medicine. It's not like just the science and art of medicine itself, which is technical and algorithmic. While that is mentally stimulating, what's exciting and inspiring is to witness my patients' like real life stuff. Things that people love really come out when they're really sick.
Have you experienced a lot of moments where patients are having the last breath, or I guess on a dying bed, and seeing, was there I guess what was your first experience like, if you're able to talk about it? And you see any commonalities between like patients being in the last moments? Is there a mental change, or is there like a peace that comes with them just from like accepting what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's different because some patients do have some level of consciousness where their eyes are open and they may be even talking. And then they close their eyes and you see their breathing patterns change and they pass away. I have experienced that. My grandma was like that actually before I was a doctor, while I was in med school. She passed away in a really beautiful way where she was on hospice, and I have a big family and we were all around her bed, and she was awake and she was able to recognize all of us, and she said names. And so she just made eye contact with everybody in the room, like her grandchildren, her children. Then she closed her eyes, like she saw everybody, and then she could finally be at peace. And it's not like that for everybody. Some people, they come to the hospital dying and there's no last goodbye. They do not open their eyes. We don't know how conscious they are. But my personal practice is to treat that patient as if they are conscious. They might be able to feel energies and auras, like, I don't know. So, you still come in with love and respect into the room. And that's what I tell my patients' loved ones. Like, just because they're not interacting with you, treat them like you would want to treat them in their last days. Like if they love music, or, they got grandkids or something, bring them through so they could hear their voice, because you don't know,
So, for example, just because there's a patient in a coma doesn't mean that they're completely disconnected. There might be something that they're perceiving.
I don't believe that, and there have been accounts, by like scientists, physicians that are, and people that aren't scientists that have written books about their experience in being under or being in a coma, and that they have been able to accurately identify certain people that came into the room after the fact, after they wake up. And so it just feels right to treat it like that.
Have you incorporated any cultural or spiritual beliefs as far as applying it towards the end of life transition?
Yeah, I think to some level we all do. Like every provider does, just because we can't be void of it. And that the medical profession, when it comes to death and dying, it's not like the super standardized algorithm. It's this is another topic, and this isn't answering your question, but another topic is the provider's emotional space that they're in and how much energy they have that day. Like if they had a rough day where they had to spend a lot of their energy trying to save lives in the hospital, and stuff was popping off, and then they have a patient that's in the dying process, what happens in a lot of our brains is that patient that's already in the dying process, it takes less priority because we had to spend energy with people's lives that we tried to save. And so when you walk into the room, you're kind of like, all right, like I don't have that much energy left, so you're still kind and as warm as you can be, but that's a factor too. Like doctors are humans too.
How do you I guess, and by you also doctors or providers in general, juggle all this simultaneously in a chaotic environment where there's like so many things that as you said earlier is not or some things can be like more accurate, but other things can be a little more loose, right? How do you navigate all these things while still working, and then someone's like depending on you? Because it seems very stressful.
It is. It's wildly stressful. Hospital medicine. I mean, clinic medicine is stressful too in a different way. But I think, people get weeded out mentally for med school, that you have to like process a large amount of information in a very small amount of time and be accurate. So these standardized tests, while they have many, many flaws, that's one of their designs, in my opinion, is that you weed out people that cannot process complicated information very quickly and accurately. So that's like the technical side of it. And then the emotional side is that it's very difficult and different doctors have different approaches. But it's honestly practice, Vin. Like residency is like 60 to 80 hours a week, man. Like, can you imagine doing one thing for that many hours a week? Like for 3 straight years, dude, like it's intense.
Yeah, I've worked that many hours per week before, but I'm fortunate to say that there was no one immediately affected whether they're going to die or not based on my decisions, right? So even though my hours matched up, the stakes doesn't match up.
Yeah, so I would say it's like practice, basically, being thrown in, and residency is just like this wild experience.
What was your first experience like when you were encountered your first patient that may be dying on your watch?
It's hard for me to remember the first one, man.
Or if not the first one, what was like ones that stood out to you that it really, or is it even a place where you kind of had to get desensitized and block some of these things out in order just to move forward?
Well, that's an interesting question. You end up getting desensitized when something happens a lot. I think that's with everything.
Like for example, I recognize that even though I love health, I could never and would never want to be a provider just because a person dying would take too much toll on me,
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah, I think every provider is different. But yes, for me, there is certainly a level of desensitization when you see it so much. But I don't like the perception that somehow I've hardened my heart or my soul, and that's why I'm desensitized. I don't agree with that. I think it's more that I am so steeped in it that it's just a fact of life. Like, if you're trying to teach a kid about life and death, you want to sugarcoat it because you don't want to hurt their feelings. But like, what is actually true? Like, death is a part of life, and there's only so much emotional energy somebody has to give, and so you really do have to prioritize where you put that. And so,
was it through medicine or another event that really brought you the experience of life and death connection?
It was mostly through medicine. Yeah, I would say my grandma, my maternal grandmother passing away was the first, up close experience I had. But yeah, it was mostly through medicine.
Yeah, I was talking to certain people, and then they were saying as like a way to get more experience in this realm in a natural way is like, say, if you had to have kids or families, right, and they have pets, is to involve the kids in the stage where the pet's dying, like bring the kid into the room and like, hey, this dog's dead, right? It's not, it didn't just disappear and go to a magical place. Or maybe it did, who knows, but it still,
nobody knows.
Yeah, nobody knows, but like make it apparent that it's actually dead and then just run away. And
dude, this has become the Death and Dying podcast. But what's interesting about ambiguity is that how uncomfortable or comfortable are we with ambiguity, with the unknown, and that has always been interesting to me. Like, how do I deal with it in my life? But when I'm talking to patients about what could or couldn't happen if they get the surgery, don't get the surgery, take this med or don't take this med, it is ambiguous because nobody knows the future. I don't know what's going to happen, in the next hour. Like, I'm not sure. And so,
all right, let's jump into what you mentioned earlier about your publication as far as the South Asian heart disease.
Yeah. That was interesting. That I just wanted some experience with research, basically. And at the time, I thought I wanted to do cardiology, so I chose that research. And it was an interesting process to like sift through data, work with statisticians, and see if there is any. You're basically looking for relationships between variables. So if you're from South Asia and we correct for variables that we know are risk factors for coronary artery disease, correcting meaning that we kind of take those off the table for affecting your risk of coronary artery disease. Do you still have a higher risk? And, when you find that information and you publish it, it's up to the rest of the medical world to kind of be like, okay, this group from Oakland, California saw this risk. Another group from London also found this risk. Another group from New York found this risk. Maybe there's something here. Let's continue to investigate why. And that's how a lot of medical research works. So if you look at like cigarettes cause cancer, like everybody knows that. But there was a time when like they were in court, like it was like the federal government versus like the big tobacco companies, and the tobacco companies were like, no, dude, it's an association. That doesn't mean cigarettes cause cancer. People that smoke, they also drink. Why don't you talk to the liquor corporations? Because it's probably the liquor that's giving them cancer, not the cigarettes. And association isn't causation, right? So in science and medicine, it is a really interesting process of the evolution of knowledge. If a group has worked their whole life to give you this nugget of knowledge, then it's up to the next group. It could be 100 years later to use new technology and new knowledge to really dig deeper and find out. And so that process was really interesting. And also to get really down and dirty with statistics and the amount of manipulation one can perform with numbers, the amount of manipulation one can perform with words, what it means to publish in a peer-reviewed journal that's extremely popular versus not. So we published in a major journal, and that process was really difficult because there's like 2 independent reviewers. You worked your butt off on these articles, and you're like, it's solid, and you send it to them, and they like pick it apart, man. They're like, this number doesn't make sense. And, on page 1, you said this, but page 6, you said this. Can you make sense of that? And it could be 2 or 3 revisions, and only then do you get published. And in that type of course, there's always holes, but at least there is a peer review. There is a process to ensure quality of information. And for us, we were lucky because our data set was well known already. It was a high quality data set. And
you mentioned that there was not any clear definitive conclusions, right? But is there at least like some?
Well, no, there is a definitive conclusion that there is an increased risk for South Asian Americans, an increased risk for coronary artery disease.
But why? As far as why, is there any candidates?
Not, not that's like, yeah, that's definitely it. No, there's not. Like diet or, the genetics around it. Not that I have seen. I still get emails now. This was like 15 years ago I published it. Like I still get emails now from people from around the world. Like, oh, I read your article. We've been doing this. Da, 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 da. Like, it's really hard to find causation in biology when there's so many variables in life. Like what we breathe, what we drink, like microplastics, diet is so hard to study, dude. Like it's your diet. It's like, how are you going to study people's diet, man? You're going to set up a camera. You're going to see exactly what they eat, and that's the thing. Like you had touched on internet medicine. Like you had asked me that question on the phone. Like, what's my reaction to all these medical claims from people that may not have the knowledge to actually say what they're saying,
Yeah, and also like with more access to information, whether it's music events, right, or maybe a health trend, or maybe some random health meme. So, what's been your experience with that? Have you noticed a negative impact from like social media? I guess fake news kind of situation, or are people generally more aware and like making better choices now because there's just so much access to information?
Yeah, I think it goes both ways. I think there's definitely people that have access and they use it. They use the information that they read, and they add it to this thing called common sense. You know what I'm saying? And that works. That works. And sometimes they try things that might not, have a lot of data behind it, but they know that it's not going to be crazy harmful. And then there's people, like, there'll always be people that do like crazy things, and they think that because it's published in digital ink that it must be true, that digital ink must be true. And I'm not saying that real ink is always true, right? That's not what I'm saying at all. But like recently I was having an argument with a friend, and they were like, "Oh, if it's on Google, it's true."
But everything's on Google.
I know. That's what I said. I was like, if you type in the most racist shit into Google, you're gonna pop up and you're gonna find it. You're gonna be like, yes.
There's pictures of Abe Lincoln commenting on the internet on Google.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it could be a problem, but I don't find it that much of a problem in my everyday practice. But dispelling some harmful things it does sometimes create more work. Like, I don't claim to know everything. So if someone's like, I take all these vitamins and I do these enemas every Sunday and I pray under this tree, and like, I don't judge any of that, man. Like, I have my own beliefs that might sound crazy to other people. And honestly, some of the stuff, like medication, is crazy too, bro. Like, some of the potential side effects are bonkers. Like, when you look at the list, you're like, oh, I don't want that. So I don't judge it that way.
Okay.
I'm just looking for, is there like a high risk for harm to what this person is doing? So
like, what would the threshold be for potential benefit versus potential high risk? Like, what does that threshold look like for you? Like, when does one outweigh the other, Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. Or I guess, because you touch on common sense and how you can apply that. But I think common sense is back to the whole being ambiguous thing, right? So what can you offer as far as like, hey, follow these guidelines and it might help you filter out the BS? Like, what does that look like for you? I would say, if somebody has a question about like ingesting meds off the internet, talk to a health provider. But that doesn't hold weight with a lot of people, because people are like, my health provider sucks. They don't ask me questions. They barely look at me in the eye. They have 3 minutes whenever I go in. And when I do ask them about like, some random herb, they don't know. They have no idea. They look it up on the internet too. And I can do that. So why would I spend time going to my doctor to ask about this thing? And then you could be like, well, these companies, you don't really know what's in it. And they're like, well, I don't know what's in the antibiotics you give me either. I have no idea what the chemical structure of that is. I haven't been to the facility where they make it. So there's always these counter arguments where you can't really say anything. And so I kind of take a like hands-off approach where I'm like, no, I understand, man. Like, if that makes you feel good. But I would say, like, I don't know if you're like, some people, they come in with like high blood pressure for years, and they've come to the hospital like 10 times for the same thing. And they have all the issues with high blood pressure. They've had strokes and heart attacks. They got kidney damage. And I'm like, bro, like, we've had this discussion so many times. And like, I don't like taking medication. I'm like, I bet, but why is your drug screen always positive for cocaine though? And that's the type of thing. Those are the easy ones. And I don't mind saying it, because it's like, I'm not trying to make you feel bad about yourself. It's like, you do like taking drugs, just not not those drugs. And sometimes it's something like, oh, I have erectile dysfunction when I take that drug, and cocaine doesn't do that.
I mean, it does for some people, but you know what I'm saying? Like, and they might not want to tell you that that's the reason. But if they did tell you, you could be like, all right, let's try another medication that doesn't do that, you know?
So do you have, you notice a lot of patients either not taking responsibility because maybe there's a taboo behind their shyness, like, oh, I don't want to talk about cocaine because it's illegal, and so I don't want to associate myself with that. Because the other day I was listening to a podcast with an anesthesiologist, and then they were saying how like patients really need to be honest about what they're consuming or not, and because when they go under and the surgery, it could potentially be
fatal.
Be fatal. That part I didn't know. I didn't really know that connection there, but it makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But it's hard. It's people, they come with their own stories, man. You know, like I really try not to judge, like if someone's like just can't get their act together and not take the med. I don't really know what their life is like. They might be dealing with mental illness, and they might have, you know, a difficult housing situation. They might have family members that are, you know, need their attention or their money or something. And it's just really hard to get to the Walmart to get your meds. People that don't have rides, they have disabilities, they can't get around, they don't have enough support. So you try to take all that into account and see where you can help. And then there's the part where you also have to play more of a paternal role, where you're like, hey, listen, like you need to suck this up, and you need to like just get on a bus and get your meds every 3 months. And we will do our best to make sure the meds are there to refill. We'll do our part. You got to do your part, because this is your life, you know? And
it's a partnership, man.
Yeah, there's a mixture of like being really empathetic with the issues that they are facing, and also kind of being like a coach. Like, you got to push through it, man. You know, like I know it's painful, but you have to do this if you want to have a, you know, more enjoyable life, a longer life, or a more enjoyable life, or both. And so it's an interesting combination.
So on the topic of social media, would you say that social media, especially with all the crazy stuff that went on during the pandemic, right? Do you think that the perception of doctors has changed? Because now, are there more like medical conspiracies, and is there like a oh yeah, my doctor is out to get me or something like that?
I don't know, Vin.
I
don't know. I always felt like
because on certain feeds, I did notice there's like a trend on like medical conspiracies, like, oh, the medical system is out to like sterilize all of us or something like that, you know?
Yeah. No, there's always that. It's really interesting. Like when I was learning to meditate, mostly in med school, I was part of this organization, a meditation organization. And people would come at me crazy, like, oh, you're in med school, huh? So they're like teaching you how to poison people?
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I'd be like, all right, like I'm not going to engage in this conversation, you know? And I had this one experience with someone, you know, who I considered a friend, and they told me to my face, they were like, I think Western medicine is like the devil, da da da. And I was like, yeah, whatever, that's cool. I'm trying to change your mind. I also don't want to have this conversation. But that same person had called me a few months later with an illness and asking me what to do. And, you know, I often find that there's a lot of hubris or ignorance when people have strong opinions about something, but then when they need help, that changes. And I've been through that too. So I'm not judging them. I'm not saying I'm holier than thou. I have displayed hubris. I have displayed ignorance and been like, I would never do such a thing, or you're stupid. And then like a year later been like, oh shit, I'm the stupid one. You know, I need some help now. You know, I need to get my head out of my ass. So I sense a lot of that. I also understand why there's a lot of mistrust. I understand why there is a lot of ignorance around health.
Yeah, why do you think that is?
I think it's a wild lack of education. I think going back to quality of education, I think there's a lot of things we could teach children that are ready to hear. There's no reason kids can't know anatomical words of their bodies, their parts, their internal structure, how sugar might damage your blood vessels, you know, what leads to high blood pressure, the association between salt and high blood pressure, why exercise is so beneficial. Hell, man, you know, we go out all the time and people are getting hearing damage. You know what I'm saying? Myself included. Like, I got tinnitus right now, bro. Like, I woke up this morning. I went to Black Coffee last night, amazing show, and I wore protection. I had my ear condoms in. You know what I'm saying? But still, like, I have hearing damage from clubbing for so long. And there's no reason like a school can't be like, hey, kids, if you're at a concert, like, get good hearing protection. There's no reason you can't say those things, you know, about health. And like, think back to sex ed, like how bad it was. And that's like the little tiny bit you get about this, like, for what? And like, you know, I believe we should know our history, but think about all the hours they spent making you memorize this revisionist white power history shit that they could have spent like teaching you about your body and how to be healthy, financial literacy, so that you don't have fucking credit card debt at 26% and you're not, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
it's actually nuts that like the credit card companies will just hand out credit cards when you're, I think, 16 or 18, something like that, without any kind of instruction manual or guide, because it's like a big power, right? Like, hey, here's money you don't have, you can spend it right now. Yeah, it's way too tempting.
Oh yeah,
like way too tempting, you know?
Yeah, man. So yeah, that I think it stems from just poor education from a society's perspective. As far as the mistrust, I mean, we can go down the list. But you know, the pressures of the way our medical system runs, and the realities of the intersection of technology and pathology, meaning what tech do we have available? How much does it cost? And what are the sicknesses out there that we're really trying to look for? And then how do we get paid for that? How do insurance companies pay for that? And then how does the customer, really the patient, you know, how does the patient pay for the health insurance and then interact with the medical system? And that is all extremely stressful, right? Nobody has enough time. Nobody has enough money. There's too many middlemen. There's too much money that goes into the middlemen. The technology itself is expensive to run, depending on what country you're in, because of the cost of labor, parts, etc. So I understand why people are like, fuck doctors, fuck the medical system, fuck the clinic, fuck insurance companies. I feel the same way. I don't want to go to I haven't seen my doctor in years. I don't want to go to my doctor.
So I say, since you're a doctor too, what... obviously, I'm not a doctor. So if I go to a doctor, I can get input that I can't have on my own, right? But since you're a doctor, what do you go to your doctor for?
When I tore my meniscus and I needed something.
Okay.
You know, I was like, I had torn it for months, and then I rested it. It got better, and then we did the whole battle thing, and then it got worse during the battle. It swole up. I was like, it's back. It's probably not better. It hurts. It feels weak. Now I have to go because I think I need an MRI, you know? And so the MRI confirmed it. And then the insurance company needed that to then, you know, pay for physical therapy. But then the physical therapist I didn't like, and I've been to PT so many times because I have other issues with my shoulders. And I was like, now I just got to pay out of pocket for a physical therapist I like that has been very helpful. And so, of course, the medical system sucks because I do pay for health insurance through my job. You know, they take out of my salary for it. And now, like, I'm a, like, you know, functioning member of society that pays into the system through taxes. Why do I also have to pay out of pocket for PT that's beneficial?
Yeah, I absolutely agreed. Did you see that Mr. Beast video where, well, actually, do you know who Mr. Beast is? He's like the biggest YouTuber out there, right? Like, he has like 150 million subscribers.
YouTube beast.
Yeah, seriously. So his brand is pretty much like doing outrageous stuff with money somehow involved. Meaning, for example, like, hey, I want to draw a square on this thing. If you stay in the square, for whoever is the last person in the square gets all this money, right?
Yeah. I have seen those.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure other copycats have done it, but he's very well known for it.
Yeah.
So how this relates is he did a video where he paid for, so he paid for 1,000 people's operation or a surgery or whatever else involved in curing their blindness. Like he paid for it, right? He made a video of it too. Mm-hmm. And then his thing was like, well, now we have 1,000 people that can now work and be productive and not disabled, right? It's like, so even from an ROI perspective, if the government just stepped in and just did all these things, you have like you get more tax dollars because now they're working and they're making more money. So kind of everyone benefits. So in your example, it's like, yeah, why don't we do these things in school? Because healthy people are going to work longer, probably have like better mindsets.
Yeah, it goes back to money and the power brokers, the groups involved in healthcare delivery, essentially. And it's wildly complicated. The web is wildly complicated. And let's just say if there's a group, let's say a group of insurance companies or pharmaceutical companies that can band together to have billions of dollars at their disposal to influence Washington, then that's what they're going to do, because people with money that have power are going to do whatever they can to maintain that. And I'm not talking conspiracy shit. It's just that's just how power works, in my opinion. And it's very hard to puncture holes into that, or it has proven to be very difficult to puncture holes into that. And a lot of people are at fault. Doctors in like the 50s were at fault because they didn't want to socialize healthcare. And then the government was later at fault because they may have been in bed with certain corporations. And then sometimes patients are at fault because they want to have everything when they want to have everything. They don't want to diet and exercise, right? They want the pills. So now the pharmaceutical companies are like, oh shit, people just want to watch TV and they'll take pills. All right, bet we're going to charge this much for pills because they're going to pay for it.
Yes, I guess it's like a supply and demand markets.
Yeah,
economics. Do you have any experiences with the healthcare system in other countries? Because I think I'm guilty of this too, where you hear about other countries and how good they have it, or you compare it to America and you're like, yeah, this system sucks, but yeah, what's the truth in all that, right? Like, because for example, I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast, and one of his guests was saying that in Canada, I believe, even though healthcare is free, so I didn't look into this deep, so if someone fact checked me, but even though healthcare is free, if you wanted to get a certain operation, it's like a really long waiting list. Yeah. So there's downsides to that.
Yeah. So I'm certainly not an expert. Every health system is wildly complicated, and they all have their pluses and minuses. So one of the pluses of having this like supercharged capitalist medical system is that we make shit usually before other people do, because the reward is so high. And because there's so much money, we get all the brain power, and they fly here and they flock here. And, there might be knowledge in other countries, but then we kind of profit off of it. So we make more things that make more impact. But yeah, I mean, like my sister lived in France for a bit. Yeah, it's free. There is access for primary care, but yeah, stuff like surgeries and stuff, there's certainly a wait time. Maybe Canada has a better balance, between their public health system and how private delivery might be more beneficial in a customer care way. I don't know all the details, but it certainly takes longer to get things like MRIs for your knee, right? Like if you tore your meniscus, but you're young and healthy and you're going to work, you're not going to get that MRI for a while, And healthcare rationing happens everywhere. Americans do not like that term.
What does that mean exactly?
Healthcare rationing means that I will not give you this thing that you want because we do not have unlimited resources. So you're going to have to wait. And this person that's dying, they're going to get resources, right? In some countries, if this person's dying and there's a very little chance of bringing them back or adding any quality to their life, then we ration, meaning that country is rationing and says, nah, man, why are you going to give this person an MRI for what? If you find something on the MRI, what's it going to do for their next 5 months of their life, 3 months of their life, 2 weeks of their life? If you give this person this really expensive medication, what's the best case scenario? You buy them what, a month? And it costs what? 50 grand, 100 grand? When that 100 grand, that by the way is not infinite, we can use that to cure a child's blindness, right? Or, something really curative for people where they can be functioning members of society. The quality of life is high. The ROI is high, the way society would think, capitalist society would think. So that's rationing. Everybody does it. Nobody wants to talk about it. It sounds like it's evil to take away something necessary, but it's a fact of life. It's just there are not unlimited resources.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's not unlimited resources, but probably unlimited wants.
Yeah, and that's, governments and businesses essentially come together to decide where that is. And if you have such a profit based, it's a service based. Healthcare here is service based. Of course, we have a public private hybrid, right? Medicare and Medi-Cal or Medicaid in other countries is a huge it's a socialist method of delivery and payment for healthcare in America. So people have to understand that we have both. We have a social net, like what Europe does, and then we have a huge private net as well. And those two things, the incentives do not align a lot of the times, because if I pay you for every surgery and that's the only way you get paid, you're probably going to do more surgeries. But if I pay you a salary and I say, hey, Vin, maybe there's some bonuses, bro, but listen, if you do 50 surgeries this month or if you do 10.
50 surgeries a month sounds ridiculous.
Sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get paid that much more. So now you might have a negative incentive, So there is no perfect answer. There are cultures and their cultural beliefs, and it's how we execute it. And it's a big topic. It's a really complicated, big topic.
Yeah. Have you noticed any different beliefs as far as how people approach health? Because earlier we were talking about there's a demand for, I want to not change my lifestyle. Mm-hmm. I want you to give me a pill because I'm gonna give you up all my responsibility and all my power in order to not change, right? Do you feel like that's an American thing, or is that just a modern developed country thing? What is it?
That's a good question. I've traveled a lot, but I've only lived in the States. Okay. I feel like you gotta live somewhere,
okay,
or at least be intimate with somebody that's from somewhere else. I see it everywhere. America's amazing and beautiful because of its cultural diversity. Especially growing up in New York or in the Bay. Man, there's so many cultural experiences I had growing up where I feel like I could speak on some different cultures.
Sure.
I feel like, no, it definitely spans cultures. The idea of, something being easy fix, I suffer from the same thing too, so, yeah, but again, it's also up to, doctors or schools, parents, whatever.
So let's. I think it also connects back to the education system thing, right? So, see if you follow me on this. When you were in school, from first grade to 12th grade, let's say math, there's a clear progression of those topics, right? Hey, 1 + 1 maybe first grade. I don't know what first grade is or what is one, right? And 2, maybe calculus. Very steep progression, right? But I feel like when it comes to physical education, in first grade, it's you run around. In 12th grade, you just run around.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any actual education happening. And if it is, it's a very slow stream.
Yeah.
To how complex the human body is, how complex the movement is, you might run a mile and then you're still running a mile later on. Can you touch your toes? It's very, very basic stuff. So I think when we were adults, depending on whether you have access to or have never had access to a physical art form, you may not have any clue about what your body can or should do.
Yeah. I would agree. Yeah, going back to just poor education for health. Man, even now it's hard, dude. Working with my physical therapist now, she's really cool. She has a doctorate in physical therapy, and she asked me to, she was like, do some house dance, do a couple rounds, put on your music in the gym.
As part of physical therapy?
Yeah, and she didn't start with that because my knee was not doing well. So first she ramped me up, and then after 6 weeks, I felt so much stronger and so much better. She helps me so much. And then when I was feeling good, she's like, "Yo, just do some rounds right now, and I'll watch your movement, and based on your movement, I will develop a program.
That's super cool.
It's super dope, right? So like different like squats and like burpee type of things, and like different twisting while my knee is flexed, which I never thought to do that. Like, you know, I probably tore my meniscus in a fully flexed position with my knee was fully flexed. I'm on the floor, and then I'm trying to twist on the ball of my right foot.
Yeah, you know, through Brian Greene, I did learn that depending on how you do your loose legs, some of them are better for your knees and ankles than others.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
So like meniscal tears often happen with these rotational movements. And there's a lot of that in house, right? And so I also started dancing at 39. Like, and I was certainly not an athlete. You know, and then you compare yourself to dancers that you see in your community or that you might see on Instagram, and you're like, well, they can do this, you know, but not everybody's body. And you also got to know that like there's some self-selection, bro. Like, you know, like if you watch an NBA player and they're doing this crazy stuff, like they are the, you know, 0.0000001% a physical athlete.
Yeah, I also think certain bodies were built to do certain things. I think there's something behind the way that Michael Phelps' physique is. I think he has a longer torso.
Yeah, and his feet are super long, and he's got these weird proportions.
Yeah, so
kind of alien-like.
So it translated over to being like an excellent swimmer.
Yeah, I mean, you're long and slender, and like he has these huge fins, which are his feet.
Yeah,
you know, that all makes, and he has big hands. That makes a difference on, you know, how much water you can push.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. But yeah, how we get on the topic. But yeah, I would say knowledge of how our body moves and physiology. I'm saying that like I'm a doctor, right? I'm an internist, but I don't have much knowledge about, you know, sports physiology. You know, like that's a huge interest of mine. But like, even though we learn anatomy and physiology in medical school, we don't have time to connect it to dance or like all these different sports.
Yeah, that's a good point, because health is like a very broad thing, and people have different specialties. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of patients don't realize that one doctor isn't going to be like the equivalent of a Google doctor, you know?
That's why it's a team sport, man. Like, that's another crazy thing. The expectation that the doctor knows everything is crazy. That's just crazy. Like,
has that always been the case since, like, did you ever feel that way about doctors when you were growing up versus now how people perceive you?
I don't know, because, you know, my mom was a doctor, and so I don't think I had that misconception. Yeah, I feel like it happens a lot just in regular life, like outside of the hospital, where like friends or family would be like, what is this rash? Da, da, da. They gave me like a whole rundown. And I'm like, bro, I like deal with like people that are dying, you know, like infections, bleeding, cancer, heart attacks, strokes. Like something's gonna take you out. Like this tiny rash that you have, like I don't do that anymore. You know what I'm saying? I don't do that anymore. So I forgot about all the rashes I learned about. You know, there's certain rashes I know because it might mean that you have this sickness, right? But for these little things, I'm like, I don't really care, man. You know, like, not that I don't care. It's not life-threatening, so my brain is like, whatever, go see your primary care doctor.
Yeah, you know, even for dance, there's certain steps that I've learned and I taught for a good number of years, you know? Like I taught for like a good number of years, and nowadays I'm like,
Sorry, what did you teach?
House dance before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, in San Diego. And so go back to like forgetting things you don't use anymore.
Yeah.
Where nowadays when I see that, I'm like, oh yeah, I used to remember that stuff, or I used to know that stuff, right?
It's crazy, man, because in medicine and residency, the whole structure is that as your first year as an intern, you're learning everything. And then the second year, like 12 months of like all this complicated stuff, you are now a senior resident that then has to teach your interns. And you're in this middle ground of now you're a teacher. It's the weirdest thing, because it's like July 1st or something this happens. So like in June, you're an intern. You're the lowest on the totem pole, right? Now you learned a lot. But then in one day you walk into the hospital and now you have to teach people. This is after 12 months of knowing these extremely complicated things. And it's just such a funny thing how the switch flips. And you kind of have to be comfortable with being like, I don't remember that exact thing. Let me look it up. Or why don't you look it up? And we'll talk about it as a group. And it's the brain trust instead of this whole ego-based approach where I know this, I remember this, I can perform this. You start to understand that there's better patient care when it's a brain trust of people that are working together and you can question each other. You know?
Like, how do you or possibly other doctors stay current with new developments or new research?
Oh, there are publications that summarize new developments.
Okay.
And it is a lot of group teaching each other. So like a specialist went to a conference and then they come back to the hospital and they're like, oh, hey, Ashim, like this is how our treatment has changed, you know, and I learn about that through taking care of a patient with a specialist because I'm not going to go to that specialist conference, right? And then for an internal medicine thing, I might go to a conference or read something. I'll be like, oh, by the way, this is what we do now. And the specialist will learn from me. And so that's how knowledge is shared.
Yeah. What was their experience during the whole pandemic? The reason why I ask, because from an outsider, I also have some medical friends, right? But their stories were all pretty gruesome. And then I also read on social media about like there was an exodus of people leaving the health field just because it was so stressful and they were being treated poorly, and also combined with the fact that all the conspiracies around COVID, you know? Yeah. So what was your experience like?
As a doctor going through the whole process of like, we don't know what this is. People are coming in sick. They're dying. To we know what this is. It's so politically charged. We are isolated when we go home. And then my colleagues have kids, you know, are the kids going to get sick? Oh my God, I have a fever. I've had colleagues that have had to like leave their home and like rent an Airbnb and be more alone and not see their kids because it was at a time where we were constantly around COVID, bro, like every day. And then you don't want to bring that back to your kids when you don't know if kids can get it, if they're going to get sick. You know, and I didn't have to deal with that stress. I don't have kids. I don't live with my family. I had colleagues that live with elderly parents or grandparents even, you know, and they went through like crazy stuff because other people could isolate, but we couldn't isolate. We don't do our job remotely, bro. You can't not go to the office. We were going into rooms doing procedures with COVID. So it was, for us, it was that stress combined with the absolute despair of having your patient pass away and they're alone because there was a big chunk of COVID where families could not visit them. So now this whole person's life is going and all their loving relationships, their loved ones, the things that make life, cannot see them pass away. You know what I'm saying? And how sad that is. And what that does, you know, we feel bad for them, for our patients and our family, and we can't do anything. We can't do anything. I mean, there were treatments eventually and supportive care helped, but there were certainly patients we lost where we couldn't do anything. And so processing all of that while also going through your own stuff, you know, was a lot. And then the misinformation, the ambiguity, the question marks, the way the government handled some things properly and other things, you know, could have been a lot better. You know, the stuff around the vaccine and treatments and masking, all of that added to a lot of stress. And I found myself disengaging with news media, even though I had to stay on top of the medical news, obviously, for obvious reasons. And that was a turning point for me on how I interacted with news in general, like for my mental and spiritual well-being.
Was it just to minimize the amount of negativity around that you consume?
I didn't want to. The polarization that our political system has really empowered to gain votes, and that media has helped pump polarization because it increases views. It really came all together to create this really scary monster of people connecting their like life narratives to their political narratives to then their health narratives. And I felt like doctors were just like downstream where all this shit just flowed on top of them, on top of dealing with all the despair I just talked about and the stress I just talked about. And so, yeah, I myself included, bro, I went part-time. I was like, I can't handle this. But it was also a blessing in disguise, like a beautiful time where I couldn't really distract myself. There wasn't that much spending of money, and there's more appreciation for music and art. And I stumbled upon the lake, our community party at Lake Merritt called Days Like This.
Friday and summer, right?
Yeah, so it's a free community dance party. It's been going on for a few years, and a friend had brought me to the party in 2021. And I had met Rama, who's one of our beloved community members, a house dance teacher, international dancer, professional dancer, teacher, educator, and he was my first house dance instructor, and he was teaching at the lake. And I had met him. I had made some friends there during COVID, and to have that outdoor dancing experience changed my life. Like I can't say that. It sounds really cheesy and cliche, but it really did change my life. Like what I do now from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., like how my day is structured, what I think about, what I have spent money on, the people I meet, what I'm doing with you right now, that has literally changed my life. Like what I actually do with my time, not just what I think and how I feel. Of course, it's changed those things too. So COVID was a crazy experience for everybody. For me personally, it was like on the work side, really stressful. There was a lot of negativity and stress. But on the flip side, there was so much beauty, and I'm so grateful for how that time played out. And bro, like, yeah, I was just hanging out with Davey Smiles this morning, and just so grateful. Like, he's like teaching me for free this knowledge that he developed. And he was like, the only thing I want is for you to teach other people, and that type of beauty of just sharing art and love through art and giving it to other people. Bro, I'm so happy that happened. And that happened during COVID. And I don't know if it would have happened without that weird
Would you
time.
say that the COVID kind of like amplified what you prioritize your time to and like what you find valuable? Or it kind of like filters out the noise?
Bro. Yeah.
Meaning like if we weren't stuck in isolation and you were at the park, it may not have been as impactful. Is that what you're getting at?
Well, I knew I loved music when I was little. Mm-hmm. And I told you I had my first spiritual experience at a club in New York.
Yeah, because But
here's the thing. Like, if I knew music and dance was that important to me, how come I didn't do it more? Like, why? I didn't have a community. None of my homies really loved dancing. They wanted to go because it was something new, it was exciting, it's a little dangerous. We're sneaking out. Da, da, da. It's cool. Yeah, whatever. Flex is playing or whatever. Like, it wasn't like that. I never had a dance community. When I think back in med school, I would dance almost every day in my bedroom as stress relief. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't even know what a two-step was. Like I knew how to do a two-step. I didn't know that it was called a two-step. And like, why didn't I seek out to deepen the thing that I loved so much? Why didn't I interact with music more in a deeper way? And I'm not blaming myself for whatever. I was doing other things that were extremely time and energy intensive and demanding. But after residency, dude, like I had time, like why? Like I've always wanted to make beats. I've always wanted to DJ. I've always wanted to dance. I've always looked at dancers and ciphers like, I want to be one of those cool kids that can move their body. And they all look so like they're so much fun. they look so healthy and like they're so joyful. Like why didn't I not just jump in? And during COVID, the lake community, the dance community in the Bay, I'm so grateful for them, because without that, I would not have, dug into the thing that I love, and like, if you just spend time doing the things you love, we all have responsibilities, but life is just so much better. Like you just, you hang out with people that share the same loves, and then it's just more fun, like I have really close friends from work that are doctors, but we don't hang out like that. I love them and I respect them, and thank God I have them, because I can't talk to my dancer friends about the shit I go through at work. There's no way. They don't have any context. Like, you can't have context. Like, my homie went to Iraq. Like, I don't have any context with what it's like to have boots on the ground and have fucking like explosive devices around the corner. I don't know what that's like. You know what I'm saying? Like, my homies that aren't doctors, there's no way I could really have a deep conversation with them about what it's like, So I'm so grateful for my friends at work. But
would you say that the increase in your connection to creativity, like music and dance, has been brought back to medicine and maybe changed the way you either view it or approach situations, patients, or maybe even where you want to head towards in the future?
You fill your cup, you fill your cup and you sensitize yourself to your own, your internals, like whatever's going on inside you, you sensitize yourself to that. The more creativity you swim in, and the more sensitive you are to the people around you and how they're expressing themselves in more sensitive ways. And yeah, for sure, I bring that back to work.
Did you ever read any research on the benefits of being involved in a creative outlet like music and dance? And does it match up to how you experience it as a doctor?
I mean, through my personal experience, I think it, as far as how I function as a doctor and how I treat my patients, I think there's a lot more empathy, and there's a lot more understanding of what my emotional state is when I'm with somebody and there's a really stressful situation. Because, I see people when they're in pain and suffering, and when a lot of people's reaction to that is they are not pleasant to be around. Somebody who, I have had many patients' families tell me this. They'd be like, "Doctor, I'm so sorry they're talking to you like this. They are not like this. They're the sweetest person. But they came in sick. They might be confused. They might be delirious. They're in pain. They might have histories with doctors that are really bad. And I come in at that time and they are talking to me crazy. They are telling me crazy things. They're calling me names. They're saying things that are really offensive. And how do you respond to that while still being caring and sensitive and professional, but also not being a pushover, so that they know what is okay and what is not okay? And that's a balance. And the more time I spend with dance and around my friends that are in that creative space, that are sensitive to their own emotions and just energy in general. I know it sounds really foo-foo shishi to say that, like energy. What is energy? But to me, it's really real. It's palpable. Like when we dance and when I watch people dance, there's energy, bro. Like that's inside, it's outside. It's like,
yeah, I definitely believe and have experienced that before. Even just if you remove the movement, I think a person's, I don't want to say energy or mind state, but even just entering the room, that has an effect on others, right? Like if that person enters really stressed, it's going to have a certain effect versus entering really joyful. Like you can feel it right away.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, yeah, I would say that dancing and being 100% with the song and being really present with how the energy from the song feels in my body, and how that translates to movement, certainly helps with being aware of myself when I'm with my patients in those stressful situations, or if it's not stressful, just being more empathetic and sensitive to what they need. I would say yes, for sure it helps. It also helps process stress. So in that way, it's extremely helpful. Extremely helpful. Just this past Friday, I had a really difficult and hurtful interaction with the patient. And most of my interactions are great. Like, so I don't want to make this sound like my job is torture, yada, yada, yada. It's not. There are very difficult things. But a lot of interactions are really good. They're, people are cool. They're grateful. We crack jokes. Like we get deep. It's very rewarding. But there's some interactions that really break your cup. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just feel like, why do I do this? Like, what's the point? It's not worth it. And I had one of those interactions, and I went, I got out of work, and Amber, another one of community members, that's also an amazing dancer and dance teacher. She taught a class at the lake, Afro House class, and I went to the class and was dancing in the sun with my friends, and all of that negativity was just lifted, man. It was like an hour class. Like, that's it. You know how many people drink, or they smoke, or they, bury themselves in the fucking waves of Instagram or whatever. You know what I'm saying? To distract themselves from that pain. Like, the fact that I'm so lucky to have this community and this art to let myself process it and meet it head on is, I don't know, I'm just very grateful.
Yeah, I definitely concur on the like, dance and music is also how I process things as well, because I've learned how important it really is during COVID, back to like understanding our values and our priorities, right? Because there was a good stretch of time where I wanted to be a good dancer, and then COVID was like, actually, you just need dance to survive, Yeah. Whereas, like, not even being good or being seen or any of that stuff is just like, this is just how you process things, This is how you interact with others. And, speaking of interaction, I think one thing I really appreciate from house dance in particular is it taught me how to interact with others, not just others, but others of the opposite gender. Whereas I don't really find that experience as common in other outlets, like, because for sports or martial arts, it's usually same gender, right? Yeah. So there's a separation there, but dance is very common, like different age groups even, it could be kid or a grandma or a grandpa or whatever, and different ethnicities, very, very diverse. So it's like lots of I think, organic real world interaction going on.
Yeah, it's the best.
Yeah. Yeah. So on top of creativity, tell me about your rapping experience. What is that about?
Oh no. Yeah. So my first love of music was, as I said, 80s pop when I was very little. But then my second love was New York boom bap hip hop. So, and I mean like deep love, like save my life type of shit.
Okay.
So, like like Snoop Dogg Doggy Style comes out, right? And I get the album and I'm playing it nonstop. I'm reading the lyrics, and I didn't have the internet or whatever, and then like that's like West Coast hip hop, right? But then like Mobb Deep, the infamous. I'm writing down every lyric. I'm listening to the song over and over again. I'm listening to the verse over, rewind, play, and I'm writing it down in my notebook. I'm learning rhyme structure. I'm learning delivery. I'm learning metaphors. I'm learning puns. I'm learning braggadocio. How when somebody feels maybe attacked or like they don't have shit, how they could be like, no, I am still a king. You know what I'm saying? Like, talking about real things. Like it's like news media. It's like when CNN, Capone and Noriega came out and they called it the CNN report. Like they were reporting on their experience living in projects in Queens. because the news cameras weren't going there. The only time the news posted anything about a black man was because there was a black man in a hood that committed this murder on Channel 9. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I was just so drawn to the energy of the beats and God, the production level in the 90s in New York. It was crazy. Like every week there was fire coming out, heat. Like,
were you ever at any battles, rap battles?
Yeah, we used to freestyle, but there wasn't that many kids freestyling in the burbs, you know. But I did freestyle a lot with my friends, and I had saved money for some turntables and a mixer. Like I saved my mom would give me money for lunch for school, but I would just eat leftovers from my friends. And I saved money, and I worked at the nursing home, and then my friend and I, we went in on turntables and a mixer and needles. It was so much money.
Do you have any songs published?
No.
You still freestyle?
I do still freestyle with the friends. Yeah.
You want to drop a freestyle?
Not really. I did write something recently. I could do that.
Okay,
I could do that for you.
Do you need a beat, or you just want to do a cappella?
No, you can do that.
Okay.
Wow, this is weird. Okay, well, let's do it. Okay. Too many tales by these handmaids. My tales are handmade. That's blood money when you use this money as a band-aid. Handing my soul over every time I make a handshake. From the cradle to the grave, how much money can my hands take? It don't make sense to make dollars and cents when after my wake, my body burns like incense. The shadow work is intense, never know what the light brings. Shame is a shadow puppet that cut the strings. I cut my own guts for these violin strings and turn it down for what? These are violent screams. You trying to be seen, I'm trying to be felt. You chasing after likes and I don't like the smell. Just give me them 5 mics and send me off to the well. Bring some weed, I got a story to tell.
Woo!
That's the last thing I wrote.
Yo, that was odd.
Thank you, brother.
You know, like I generally felt like a vibe shift as soon as you started flowing. Like I was like, dude, this person, yeah, he just changed on me right there.
It's fun. It's fun it feels good to be in a flow and to let the flow come out of you.
Yeah.
It's like a sensual thing. It's weird. It's like, it's not just about how it sounds. It's about how it feels coming out.
Yeah. Like also the substance of what you're talking about in that flow was dope too.
I appreciate you. Man.
Yeah. Because hopefully you join me in my distaste for mumble rap, man. It kills me.
Yeah, dude.
No.
It's so bad. I had a line about dissing mumble rappers. But it became something else. It became, yeah. No. I could do it for you. Hold on. Okay. My ego took a lot of beatings but didn't crumble and die. I got diabetes while eating my humble pie. Can someone please tell me when being humble's a lie? If I see no ceilings, then why wouldn't I fly? And then I said there's something about mumble rappers in there, but I haven't figured out the verse yet.
Yeah, that was hot, dude. Like, whenever you first like experience an art form from like a friend or someone that you just met, right?
Yeah.
And then there's always that level of like, what is he actually going to be like? You were a lot better than what I was kind of prepared for.
I've gotten that my whole life, man.
Not with you, but like sometimes depending on how it is, it can get a little weird, right? You know?
Oh, yeah. Super weird. You know how many people have rap for me where it's super fucking weird? Or like poetry can get super awkward, dude. Like, because people are being vulnerable as fuck.
Yeah.
And if like you don't fuck with it, you're like, what are you gonna say? Like, you don't want to be a dick, but at the same time, it's like you like what you like. You know, it's okay.
Yeah, that's super cool. But what do you think of like hip hop nowadays versus when you grew up? Because hip hop was like, it's as far as like the commercial radio stuff, right? It's changed a lot, you know?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I think there's still amazing stuff that comes out. It's just, it's not really my cup of tea. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't, it is very diverse.
Because when I think of hip hop, I think like in my mind, it's what I would call resistance music. You know,
for sure.
Like there's meaning, there's like purpose behind it. It's not just filling clubs or filling drinks. You know. Yeah,
I think hip hop is so successful because it is so adaptable and it's so diverse. And how beautiful is it that a small group of oppressed people created this art, and it spread like wildfire to every country.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like even in Mongolia, which in my book is like the last frontier of humans living their own way. There's Mongolian throat singing rap.
For sure, bro.
It's
nuts. Everywhere.
It's awesome.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And that is hip hop's genius. Like a whole genre of music, bro, created like in the 70s, dude. Like that's so hard to do. To make a whole new genre of art that's like a actual thing, you know? Of course it has its lineage, you know, from the blues, but like I don't know, man. It's an amazing thing.
You have any long-term visions or upcoming projects? Any ideas you're bringing up?
Yes, I do. But I don't want to say what they are right now.
Okay. Well, I guess you can come back and then tell us about it. When,
because one of the intentions is to perform live with music, but I want to do it unexpectedly.
Okay.
And I want to throw people off.
Yeah.
And then turn people on. And that's just my rap journey, like, you know, rapping with kids in New York, and they look at me and, you know, like, you know, I'm not black, obviously. Like, why is this kid trying to rap? And then gaining respect from people. And some people are still like, this kid is whack. And just like living through that, I'd be like, that's fine. You know, I know I love this, and I know it's Black American art. And this art has pulled me through so many difficult times in my adolescence and my adulthood, you know, and I love it and I respect it. And I've been a part of it for a long time, like a long, long time.
Yeah, well said. So either with your creative side or the medical side, do you have any fun facts or achievements?
Oh, I taught, I taught meditation for many years, and that was a long process.
Was that through a certain research grant, or was it just?
That was self-interest. That was like, you know, having an experience of the whatever, the spiritual, but something that's not an emotion or a physical sensation, so that we're something else, that there is something else out there. And I don't necessarily believe in any of the major religions or texts or whatever, but to experience what all these books are trying to talk about in so many words, and to experience what people do crazy rituals for, or like they other people, they're othering people because they're trying to fight for this quote unquote spirituality, and to experience it just by sitting down and closing my eyes without all the ideology was just so liberating and like opened my mind. And I started that in college, without going into all the details, but I really caught on to it during college and after college, and then really dug in during med school, because I saw how, not only was it just helpful for making my mind sharper and getting rest, actual rest, because sometimes sleep isn't enough and food isn't enough. It was like exploring the depths of ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like there's like, you know, as a dancer too, you do that too. Like what new movement is going to happen? What new flow am I going to get into today or this week or next week? If I keep drilling this thing, what can I do with it in a week or 2 or 5 or 6 or a year? Right? And what are you really doing? It's not just to show off. It's not just to get likes, right? It's because you're exploring the depth of yourself. How far can I go? How deep am I? How deep is this thing? How deep are we? Like, who the fuck are we? Why are we here? I know it's getting meta, but that's what the shit is for me. That's what the shit is for me. You know, like, so meditation for me was not just stress relief or just getting a better score on a test in med school, or, you know, sleepitation where you sit to meditate and you pass the fuck out because you really need to sleep.
Yeah, I had a guest on here recently. Her name is Leila, and she was talking about meditation as well, especially in children. But also, one of her points was, and she coined the term meditation, meaning like in the West, it's meditation has become kind of like a self-serving personal tool. Like, let me meditate so I can work better. Or
the tech world did that.
Yeah. But there's a deeper side that you're leading to, which is more like who am I, the depths of me, but also who am I in the context of everything else. Right.
Yeah, right. Because there's the productivity culture, the labor culture, the capitalist culture, right? What's the ROI on this?
Yeah.
And then there's but then there's the explorative side of who are we? Who am I? What is life? What is this shit? Why are we doing this? And yeah, the experiences I've had meditating, and it's not what you talk about, it's you just can't say the stuff. Like, that's why people write poetry and sing and shit, like, I mean, I still meditate regularly. I don't teach it anymore, but
when you taught it, did you teach it to friends or was it patients, or what was that group?
Well, I was part of an organization and we would teach it to the public. We had classes that were free. We had classes that were paid for, that were longer. I also taught patients, dialysis patients, heart failure patients. I had to adjust curriculum and certain things for patients. I taught it in different settings in New York City. I taught it in Washington, D.C. I taught it in Oakland. I've held pop-up sessions in public places, be it a mall, parks, and yeah, a lot of different settings.
Any shout outs you'd like to mention?
Shout outs?
Yeah.
Like just homies?
Whatever it speaks to you.
Yeah, dude. Shout out to the Bay Area dance community. I've been shouting them out. To the organizers, the DJs, the dancers, just the music lovers that participate and come through. I'm so grateful for them. As I've been saying this whole podcast, I don't know. Shout out to so many people I've met, not just in the Bay, like in Europe and New York, that have really enriched my journey in the art. Shout out to all my friends back in New York who I've known since elementary school. I had so many of those experiences with.
Yeah, and how can
Happy
people
Mother's Day, Mom.
Oh yeah,
I love you.
There we go. The most important one.
Yeah, I'm gonna see her in a couple weeks.
And how can people best support you?
Have the courage to just like show up, and if we're dancing and you're feeling a certain type of way and it's not happy or whatever, you don't think it's a type of way that people expect from you, do it anyway. Like if you have a movement in your body or you want to say something, let it out, share in a genuine way, whether you're feeling good or not, to be genuine. And I think participation is important for our community, for myself included. I'm a new dancer. I'm very intimidated still by, more advanced dancers. And I'm honest with that with everybody. And the biggest message to myself is to participate honestly, where I am right now in my dance, and I'm sharing. And if people want to judge that negatively, that's fine. That's up to them, But all I could do is share myself in that moment. And it's a really beautiful thing that people can get together to share themselves in that way. Because sometimes people can use words to hide a lot. And dance is harder to hide.
It's impossible.
It's so, yeah, and you can tell when somebody is, or at least I think you can. And so, yeah, and I do it too. Like, I'll go to session and be like, I ain't trying to do this right now. I don't want anyone to look at me right now. I just want to be in a corner, So I would say how we could support each other, and so, not about really supporting me, but supporting each other. We can just share genuinely and receive each other.
Well said. And final closing thoughts for our listeners out there, whether it's, someone getting into artistry, creativity, or even possible patients, reflecting on their own health, or maybe potential new providers.
Yeah, I would say like we should be finding our joy and spending time pursuing it and steeping ourselves in that pursuit, in that practice. And sometimes that takes discipline and sacrifice, and sometimes, it's kind of easy. But for me, it's been a struggle for sure to make time and space. But I'm proud of myself for carving time out and energy out, and I have made sacrifices to get there. So I've gotten a lot of help from a lot of friends, and I would love to support them in that journey. And my message to provider, patient, creative, would be, follow the joy. Don't be afraid of sacrifice and discipline to get there, and share, build your community through consistency and honest participation.
Well said. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a real pleasure. I got to get to know you a lot more and have more insights into just the overall complex environment of the medical system.
Thank you, Vin. This is great, man.
Yeah, you definitely got to come on the show again and whenever you're ready.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.